I'm your host, Maya Schneider, and this week it's my pleasure to introduce to you Ed Gurowitz. Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's nice to have you here. I have a list of things to attribute to you. I was going to say this is Ed Gurowitz from the North Tahoe Hebrew congregation, but you're also Ed Gurowitz, business consultant and executive coach.
True.
Let's start there and then
right.
work our way over to the congregation. What does it mean being an executive coach?
Well, an executive coach, I work with executives, oddly enough, and generally work with them on individual issues of effectiveness rather than working on their organization. I'd be working on their communication skills, their management issues. Very often it's issues like succession planning, moving up in the organization. People I work with have been targeted to become the CEO or an upper level executive, and I'm working with them to cover whatever gaps there are between where they are now and where they need to be to get there.
When I think of successful executives, I think of people who may have already come out with an MBA and we would assume would be prepared for whatever comes to them. What kind of issues are facing these people generally?
It's really varied. It's very hard to say. It's individual. Sometimes it will, well, one company I work with, which is a California company, brought in a lot of executives from the East Coast, and
culture shock.
And they brought me in because these people were just too East Coast. It's really as varied as the individuals that I work with, but no matter how skilled they are, no matter how experienced they are, champions have coaches. You know, if you watch the Olympics, you saw that almost everybody had a coach. I can't remember the name of the figure skater that decided to go without a coach. At the risk of sounding self-serving, it didn't turn out well. And generally, the more competent, the more advanced people get, the more they realize the need for someone from the outside that they can talk to, that they can work with. And the other thing is, the higher up you know, that it's lonely at the top, but it really is. And the higher up you get in an organization, most of my clients are CEOs, and they don't have anybody to talk to. Everybody they talk to has an agenda, or is worried about talking to them, or is afraid to talk to them, and it helps them to have somebody on the outside who has only their interests at heart.
And understands them.
And understands them, exactly. A coach is somebody who takes on the client's commitments rather than having any commitments or agenda of their own.
How is it that you get to build this rapport, this trust? What's your background so that when you walk in, they feel an affinity with you?
It's really, a lot of it is chemistry. It doesn't work with everybody. And the biggest single selection factor actually is how well the person and I hit it off.
Yes.
I just came back from Kansas City, where I spent 2 days with the CEO of a large pharmaceutical firm. And we spent those 2 days talking, having lunch together. We went to a baseball game together. We talked about his family. We talked about his company. We talked about his relationship with his board. And at the end of the 2 days, it was pretty clear we could work together. Sometimes, rarely, it's not. In addition, I'm a psychologist by training. I was a psychotherapist for many years. Not that coaching is psychotherapy, but it does provide some skills and some background. And I've been a management consultant, organizational consultant, and executive coach for about 25 years in a variety of industries. So I have to establish my credibility, but generally speaking, I've got enough experience that I'm fairly credible.
And you walk in with some good credentials.
Right, and I dress well.
That helps. Now, when you were in Kansas City, did you go to Arthur Bryant's?
No, no, but we went to KC Masterpiece Barbecue.
and found out where the bottles come from.
That's right.
Right. I've always had a question for people who work in organizational design, organizational development. You are charged with coming into an organization and helping them shift from current patterns sometimes into new ways of thinking.
Right.
How do you develop new ways of thinking? How do you stop from becoming stale?
A lot of ways. One, I have coaches. I have other people that I work with. And I'm in a constant, and I don't mean to sound pretentious about this, but I'm in a pretty constant development process. I work with a company in Boulder that specializes in communication. In addition to working with them with their clients, I'm also doing one of their programs beginning in June. I'm doing a year-long personal development program. There's all the ordinary stuff, the usual stuff of keeping up on the literature, and I just came back from a workshop with Jim Collins, who wrote Built to Last, and his new book is Good to Great.
Right.
Spent 2 days listening to him and engaging with him about the work that he's doing. There's an enormous amount of creative thinking going on in the business world. I think the business world is one of the most creative arenas there is, and if you are willing to keep, I can't remember who it was, I actually think it was the philosopher Heidegger that said that you have to be willing to be shaken to your depths by what you're hearing, by what's new in what you're hearing, and that's a discipline that I've engaged in all my life. My God, I sound pompous.
No, actually, this is really interesting stuff. I'm going to lose track of my questions here. You're living in Incline Village.
Yes.
So you're living in a small community. You're living in Tahoe, which is in itself sort of an insular community.
Right.
How do you keep that global perspective when you're working with global companies?
Well, today, where you live really doesn't matter. I'm on the internet all day. I'm doing research. I'm literally in constant communication with, I have one partner in San Diego. I have people that I talk to or in email with in Scotland, Sweden, Israel, Hong Kong, and I've worked in all these places. Part of it for me also is over the years I've worked pretty much all over the world with both U.S. and foreign companies. And I stay in communication with those people. The usual same stuff everybody does. I subscribe to a dozen, newsletters and news services and all that, and you do your best to keep up.
And you get to live in Tahoe.
And I get to live in Tahoe, which people often, I tell people two things about that. One, it's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it. But then they ask me why I live in Tahoe, and I tell them for the same reason that rock stars date supermodels.
Because they can.
Because they can, exactly.
That's not the analogy I always hear, but it's much more pleasant on TV.
Yes.
You've written 2 books. You've had one published. You're working on the other?
The other, yeah. I published one. I think I should publish a book every 30 years. So my first book was published in 1968.
Okay.
And my next one is coming out when I get the time to finish it.
All right. And what's the book you're working on right now?
Well, it's called Growing Up, It's Not Just for Kids Anymore. And it was really stimulated in part, my kids will kill me for this. I have two sets of kids. My older kids are 30, she'll really murder me, 35 and almost 30, and my younger kids are in their early 20s. Right. And I saw a huge difference between those 2 sets of kids in the growing up process.
They grew up in very different times.
They grew up in very different times, and I think that's the key to it. I think something happened, and I put it around the Vietnam War era.
Yeah.
Something happened that essentially killed personal responsibility.
Yes, yes. When did that happen?
I can't give you a date, but it was somewhere around, I think for those of us, for everybody, for the people who went to Vietnam and the people who didn't, the thing was so off. It was so difficult to comprehend why we were in that war, why we couldn't get out, And it was the first war since forever that didn't end up with a clear victory.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, the joke is we declared victory and got the hell out.
Right.
But it wasn't a victory. And it wasn't a victory for the people who didn't go, because their goal was really to bring some sort of their idea of justice and morality to it. And it was an argument in which everybody was right.
Yes. Yeah.
But somehow that left everybody, and I lay a lot of this at Johnson and Nixon's door, and a lot of it at McNamara's, because nobody was willing to stand up and say, you know what, I was wrong.
Yeah.
It was a mess, and we shouldn't have been in it. Or nobody was willing to stand up and say, we were right, either. It was like all temporizing, all explanation, all story about, well, you just don't understand. And that became the American cultural mantra.
Create an explanation
you
for
just
it.
don't understand, let me explain.
Interesting.
And so what I see, I've had a few careers. Early in my career as a psychologist, I was a developmental psychologist, and I worked in children's hospitals, and I worked with kids who were using drugs. And I began to see kids growing up later and later and later. And when I say growing up, I mean taking on some sense of personal responsibility for their lives, stopping blaming their parents, stopping blaming society. One of my early teachers, a man named Eric Byrne, who wrote Games People Play, is the book he's best known for, which isn't his best. He was better than that, but that was the popular one. And he used to joke. He wrote up on a chalkboard. He would write ARSISIETY, our society. He said, this is to blame for everything. If we could just find that guy, our society,
wherever the heck he is,
we'd know who was to blame. But there's more truth than poetry in that. So, one of the reasons the book's not finished is because after September 11th, I began to see another shift. And I think we may be moving back to a greater ethic of personal responsibility.
That would be great.
But it's too early to tell. The world changed after September 11th in ways that we won't appreciate for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I would have asked you about that as well, if you felt that there was a genuine shift or a temporary shift, and we won't know.
Too soon to tell.
Yeah.
It's too soon to tell. I think there are some things that shifted. There's no such thing as a permanent shift, but there are some things that shifted on a long-term basis. We are clearly more patriotic, have more of a sense of ourselves as Americans, less of a sense of being one down from the rest of the world. And I think the world sees us differently because we're no longer the people who never had a war. The last war on our shores was 1812.
That's right.
Other than Pearl Harbor. So we'll see how it turns out. There's a curse in Chinese. They say, may you live in interesting times.
Yes.
Well,
These are
we in the West
times.
don't consider it a curse, but these are interesting times.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Let's bring it home a little. I know that you're doing some work locally for the North Tahoe Hebrew congregation.
I have been the president of that organization for 4 years.
How's that been?
Tiring.
Yeah.
No, it's been great. We have a very unusual Jewish community here on the North Shore. And we're really the North Shore community because there's another temple on the South Shore. And of course a couple in Reno.
And North Shore includes, of course, the Truckee.
Tahoe City, pretty much, as far as Roseville in some cases.
Interesting. Huh?
And we have about 120 families, which is by national standards probably close to an average size congregation. There are some that are huge in the big cities, but 120 is a respectable size congregation. At the same time, more than half our congregation only live here part of the time.
Right.
We have a huge percentage of our people that belong to at least one other synagogue someplace. And this creates some challenges in terms of Philanthropy in terms of building a community,
Right.
in terms of a lot of things. But we have great people. We've been here for 20 years. And we were started by a very small group of people, most of whom are still here, who just began meeting in each other's homes.
Yes.
And then about 10 years ago, it mushroomed. And we got a lot of young families with children, which made a huge difference in the vitality of
Yes.
it. We have a religious school with 40.
And the
this is
vitality, but also the demands.
the demands as well. 40 kids in a religious school for a congregation our size is large.
Yes, it is.
And, you know, we have all the usual life cycle events and all that, but the most exciting thing is that we're almost finished building, a synagogue in Tahoe Vista. Up till now, we've met at the conference center in Kings Beach, we've met in churches, we've met in casinos, we've met in people's homes.
There's an
we've met-
irony to that.
In fact, we met at the high school in Tahoe City one year.
You did hold services at the Community Rec Center a couple of times here in Truckee.
We've done that every year. The second day of Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, we've held services here in Truckee to accommodate, you know, a large part of our people are from Truckee. We're hoping that by placing it in Tahoe Vista, you know, and you don't get a lot of choice when you're building
Yes,
on the North
right,
Shore. You
right.
build where you can build. We're hoping that it'll be central enough that we'll accommodate everybody. It's going to be a community center as well as a synagogue, so there will be space for, you know, parties and jazzercise classes and gatherings and yoga and, you know, whatever the community wants to use it for. When I say the community, I don't just mean the Jewish community.
The
It'll be
larger community.
open to the larger community as well.
All right.
And we're very excited about it.
How is that project coming? How much?
Oh, it's coming brilliantly. It should be finished around the middle of August.
Great.
And when I say finished, I mean ready to open.
Okay.
That's, of course, God willing, TRPA willing, County
Not sure
Building
which order
Department
that
willing. Yeah, I'm not placing it in any order of priority. And there'll be a lot of finished work to do and a lot that we'll add, but we'll be ready to open. It has, in the best tradition of Tahoe building projects, it's gone way over budget. Our contractor has been great about working with us.
Great.
GLA Morris, that's a plug. They've been great about working with us, and they've been great about bringing it in on time.
That's great.
Plumas Bank was very great about working with us in terms of a construction loan, and we need money. We can do it. We're going to do it. We've got it planned out. But if anybody wants to have a synagogue or a community center named after him,
There is a naming opportunity.
there is a price. I will, you know, call
And I
me.
have
I'll
a
tell you how
telephone
much it
number. We'll
costs.
have this up on the screen later on, but let's
Great.
make sure it's correct. The North Tahoe Hebrew Congregation at 546-1129.
That's an answering service,
Okay.
but people should feel very free to call me or call Rabbi Nadler or anybody they know who's in the congregation. You know, Ernie Grossman, who was a predecessor of mine as president of the congregation, is very active in the community, and most people know him. We'll all accept
Call
donations.
Ernie. He'll take your money too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I wish you luck with that.
Thank you.
It's sort of taking that Jewish community and then expanding the questions again. Has there been much dialogue within the local Jewish community about the current events?
Oh,
in the
of
Middle
course,
East? Yeah.
of course. You can't, first of all, almost everybody in our community and almost everybody in every Jewish community knows people in Israel, has family in Israel. And many American Jews feel a very close tie to Israel, especially those of us who are old enough that we remember, you know, we're older than the state of Israel.
I was going to say before Israel.
You know, I was 5 years old, but I remember the UN resolution and the vote when the state of Israel was founded. So there's a lot of concern. There's a wide range of political opinion, as there is in the Jewish community throughout the United States. Many people think that all Jews are of one opinion. First of all, that's never true.
Right, on any subject.
Right. There's an old saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
Right.
And on this one, There are those who favor getting out of the West Bank.
Yeah.
There are those who, and then there's the right-wing extreme that favor just taking it all over, and there's every range of opinion in between. It's a very difficult, very complex situation, and I worked in Israel. I've worked with the government of Israel, the current foreign minister, for a while, and I haven't met anybody on either side whose heart's not in the right place. I had the privilege of facilitating a conference at the Dead Sea several years ago that was sponsored by the foreign minister, and we had everybody represented. Well, almost. The PLO pulled out the night before because it was right after the Casablanca conference, and they just felt it would look like too much, which I can understand. They have their own constituency. But we had Israeli Arabs, Israeli Jews, public sector, private sector, Christians, Druze, which are a little-known group in Israel, but very powerful politically. And we spent 4 days working on an economic plan for the Middle East. And we made a lot of progress. And until very recently, one of the projects that came out of that meeting in Gaza was still going on. It may be still going on for all I know. I can't find out now. I didn't meet anybody whose heart wasn't in the right place. Right. I didn't meet anybody, and there are exceptions to this, the people who fly airplanes into buildings, the people who talk 16-year-olds into strapping bombs on because their family is going to get $15,000 are an exception to this, but they're the extremists. The political people, the people in the government, the people on the street want peace. Their leaders, I believe, have in many cases misled them and betrayed them. I don't necessarily think that about the Israeli leaders, although I differ politically with Prime Minister Sharon. I think, again, his heart's in the right place. I think he's at least acting consistent with his principles. I think there's some hidden, not so hidden, but there are other agendas going on. When you look at the literature, the uniforms, the shoulder patches of the PLO, you see that they have a map that doesn't show the new Palestine. It shows all of Israel.
Right.
And there's an agenda that won't be satisfied until there is no Israel, and that's not going to happen. So I don't know where it ends. I don't know where it ends up.
And unfortunately, we don't have those answers at our fingertips, or we'd be able to.
I think there was a time.
Share those.
There was a time when it could have been solved.
Okay.
And the greatest tragedy, I think, was the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. Because that just derailed the whole process. And that's unfortunate. But to get back to your question, yes, people here are very concerned. We're in touch with people in Israel, and
you talk about it.
We talk about it.
And have a dialogue.
That's what we do.
I wish we had more time to talk about it and you and your books and everything you're doing.
Well, thank you.
I certainly wish you luck, and thank you so much for being on.
Well, thank you, and I just want to say again that if I've got 2 more seconds, if we really are open to membership from anybody in the Jewish community on the North Shore. People sometimes say to me they don't join because they don't like organized religion, and I tell them you should come see us. We're not
organized at all.
Right. But we're very open. We're both religiously and philosophically to all views, and we'd love to have new members and people to help us with our building. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and spread that message.
Ed, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
It's been a pleasure having you. I want to thank Ed Gurowitz again for being our host on today's Truckee Talks, and we'll be back in just a minute with upcoming events, so stay tuned. And welcome back to Truckee Auditorium. This Rodgers and Hammerstein classic has been faithfully produced by director Peggy Belk and features a great cast. If you've never been to a high school play in this town, you're missing something, and this year is no exception to that rule. The play finishes its run May 17th and 18th, and tickets are available at Four Seasons Flowers and Gifts or at the high school library. Also, Saturday, May 18th is Kids Day at the Truckee Community Center. This free family resource fair runs from 10:30 until 3 p.m. and will feature activities, entertainment, raffles, and information on family resources. Contact the Sierra Nevada Children's Services at 587-5960. Also on the 18th, the first annual Monte Carlo night, sponsored by the Truckee Sunrise Rotary. Gamble with funny money, bid at auctions, and maybe come away with the grand prize, a week in Puerto Vallarta. Tickets are $21 in advance, $25 at the door at the community center. Call 587-4099 for more information. Windows in History is back and better than ever. This annual celebration takes a peek at Truckee's past through guided tours, photo displays, and live characters from the past and present touring the streets. Windows on History will run Saturday, May 18th and Sunday, May 19th in downtown Truckee. And be sure to watch out for the railroad regulators while you're there. The Truckee Home and Building Show returns to the Truckee Tahoe High School Memorial Day weekend, Saturday the 25th and Sunday the 26th. A $3 admission gets you in the door to see everything you need to build or remodel your home. Call 587-3477 for more information. If you'd like to have your event featured on Truckee Talks, or maybe you have an idea for a possible guest on the show, please email me at Ms. Maya, that's M-I-Z-M-A-I-A, at AOL.com, or call the TTC TV studios at 582-1194. That's it for this week. We want to thank again Ed Gurowitz for joining us on today's show. I'm off to Boston for a week, so we'll see you in 2 weeks on Truckee Talks. We'll see you then.